Welcome to Under the Palm Tree, cool reflections on God and His kingdom. Today's topic, fathers and sons. Fathers do have a great influence on their sons and their daughters. I remember when my son was about 4 years old, I would be mowing the lawn, and my son would be right behind me with his plastic lawnmower mowing the lawn. As I turned to the left, he turned to the left, and I turned to the right, he turned to the right. I should have gotten a picture of it. Sons often imitate their fathers. There's an old story about a man who asked 3 stonemasons what they were doing. The first stonemason said he was laying bricks. The second stonemason said that he was building a wall. But it was the third stonemason who answered, "I'm building a great cathedral." You may ask a similar question to fathers, what they're doing with their families. Some fathers will say, "I'm supporting my family." Other fathers will say, "I'm raising children." One sees the responsibility of putting food on the table. The other sees the responsibility of participating in shaping his child. As fathers, do we have a positive spiritual impact on our families and those around us? It's interesting that the Old Testament ends about fathers and their children. "See, I will send you the prophet Elijah before that great and dreadful day of the Lord comes. He will turn the hearts of the fathers to their children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, or else I will come and strike the land with a curse." It seems that our land is cursed today because the hearts of the fathers are not with our children, and the hearts of the children are not towards their fathers. Many children today do not know who is their father. Many children see their fathers as distant from their mothers. And many other children who do have their moms and dads living together rarely see their dads. How can we fathers have a positive influence on our sons and daughters? I want to look at 3 obscure characters in the Old Testament and see how fathers have greatly influenced their sons. If I was to give you a Bible quiz and ask you who led the children of Israel out of Egypt, you would probably answer Moses. If I was to ask you who was number 2 beside Moses, you would probably say Aaron. But if I was to ask you who was number 3, maybe you might say Joshua. But Joshua came way later. But earlier, who would have been number 3? I would think number 3 would have been a man named Nahshon. Nahshon was a leader by position. In 1 Chronicles chapter 2, verse 10, it says, Ram was the father of Amminadab, and Amminadab the father of Nahshon, the leader of the people of Judah. He was the leader. In Numbers chapter 2, verse 3 and 4, it says, "On the east, towards the sunrise, the divisions of the camp of Judah are to encamp under their standard. The leader of the people of Judah is Nahshon, son of Amminadab. His division numbers 74,600. Nahshon had the largest division in Israel, 74,600, and was in charge of the largest quarter of men, 186,400 in all of Israel. This was later on in Numbers chapter 2, verse 9. And if you say Moses was the number 1 leader next to God, and Aaron certainly would be considered as number 2, you can make a very strong case that Nahshon was third in command. In Exodus chapter 6, verse 23, it reads, Aaron married Elisheba, daughter of Amminadab, and sister of Nahshon, and she bore him Nadab and Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. You could see why Nahshon was so influential. Not only did he represent Judah, the whole tribe of Judah, but he was also the brother-in-law to Aaron. So Nahshon was this leader by position, but he was also a leader by reputation. There's a Yiddish saying that to be a Nahshon means to be an initiator. Nahshon was known as a self-starter, an initiator. He was the kind of person that people would follow. The Midrash is a collection of oral commentaries and studies of Jewish scriptures passed on down through the generations and put into written form. The Midrash tells a story that during the Exodus, when the Israelites reached the Red Sea, it did not automatically part. The Israelites stood at the banks of the sea and they wailed with despair. But it was Nahshon who entered the waters. Once he entered the waters, he walked in knee deep, waist deep, came up to the shoulders. And once the water touched his nose, the sea parted. It's interesting, the origin of his name, Nashol, means stormy sea waves. You see, Nahshon was certainly a leader in the eyes of the Israelites. But Nahshon, even though he was number 3, he was a leader who failed. The Lord said to Moses in Numbers chapter 14, "How long will this wicked community grumble against me? I have heard the complaints of these grumbling Israelites. So tell them, as surely as I live, declares the Lord, I will do you the very thing I heard you say. In this wilderness your bodies will fall, every one of you 20 years old or more, who was counted in the census, who has grumbled against me." We find that Nahshon probably was one of the leaders who brought all the complaints to Aaron and Moses and did not listen to the Lord. Nahshon, like many in his generation, died in the wilderness. Fathers, as great as a leader you may be, you have to fear the Lord. Nahshon was a great leader who failed. He certainly made an impression on his son, who became a man of action and compassion. In 1 Chronicles chapter 2, verse 11, we read that Nahshon had a son named Solomon. Not much has been written about Solomon, but we can take some educated guesses. I suspect that Solomon was a man of action, and he was probably one of the 2 spies that went into Jericho. In Joshua chapter 2, verses 1 to 24, we read about the 2 spies in Jericho. Of course, we don't know who the 2 spies were, but if I was to guess, I would say that Solomon was probably one of the 2 spies, because it's most highly likely that Rahab ends up marrying one of the 2 spies. It makes for a great romantic story, and I love romantic stories, where he goes into Jericho as a spy, and she saves his life. And later on, when the walls of Jericho came down, he saves her life. And they fell in love and got married and had a son. We're not sure if it really happened that way. The only thing we know is that Solomon did marry Rahab, and they had a son. Solomon was a father who was a leader of action with compassion. How he was greatly influenced by his father Nahshon, who was a leader and a man of action. Solomon, in his actions, also made a great impression on his son. Many years later, Salmon's son showed kindness to a foreign Moabite woman named Ruth, because Salmon's son's name was Boaz. And have you ever wondered why he was so kind to her? Why, maybe because he saw how his father was kind to his mother, who was also a foreigner. Boaz learned from his father about leadership, righteousness, and compassion. Boaz ended up marrying Ruth, and they had a son named Obed, who was the father of Jesse, the father of King David. Boaz was the great-grandfather of King David. Centuries later, Matthew writes about the genealogies that were well known to the Jewish people in the text for this message. In Matthew chapter 1, verse 4 to 6, it reads, Ram, the father of Amminadab, Amminadab, the father of Nahshon, Nahshon, the father of Salmon, Salmon, the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab, Boaz, the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth, Obed, the father of Jesse, and Jesse, the father of King David. Some people wonder why David was such a great leader. Maybe because he came from a line of great leaders, including Nahshon, Salmon, and Boaz. Fathers, as great as a leader you may be, you have to fear the Lord. You will either influence your sons and daughters to fear God or to ignore God. What are you doing with your children? Are you laying bricks? Are you building a wall? Are you raising a great cathedral? What are you doing with your children? Are you just supporting your family? Are you just raising children? Or are you shaping the future leaders of the world? Fathers, your sons, your daughters will be just like you. God has given us fathers with great power to influence our children. You may not have the gifted abilities to relate to your children, as some fathers seem to have. You may not have the resources that some fathers have in raising your children. But you are in great position to show how much God matters in your life and the generations to come.